Arvin floated in the command deck of the Erwan, his fingers brushing over the cold metal console as the ship shuddered beneath his weight. The faint hum of the failing fusion core was almost poetic in its persistence, a fragile heartbeat in a vessel stranded far from the known lanes of the great expanse. Beyond the reinforced viewport, the stars seemed to stretch infinitely bright pinpricks against an endless black ocean, but the constellations made no sense. Every map in the Terran archives had failed here. Every coordinate charted in the galactic registry had melted into obscurity. Arvin's jaw tightened. Alone, surrounded by the unknown, he felt the weight of isolation settle like a stone in his chest. His crew had evacuated to the escape pods hours earlier, leaving him to monitor the failing life support and attempt a last-ditch distress broadcast. Silence had answered him. Not static, not response, just the vast emptiness swallowing every signal, every plea. He whispered to himself, the sound of his own voice a lifeline. Not yet. Not yet. Not yet. Because surrender wasn't in his nature, not even here, far from Terran space, where humanity's touch had become almost myth. Even alone, Arvin could feel it, the echo of human defiance in his bones, the insistence that a solution existed somewhere, even if it required faith, ingenuity, or sheer audacity to reach it. The bridge lights flickered, the console screens dimming and rebooting in fits of static. Arvin's vision caught the glimmer of a star just off the port side, a star that didn't belong. It pulsed unnaturally, almost like a heartbeat itself. He frowned. Nothing catalogued had that rhythm. He adjusted the viewport, magnifying the anomaly. A small, ancient Terran beacon. It was impossible. Those were relics, scattered and forgotten during humanity's first exodus into the expanse. Yet there it floated, dormant for centuries, sending only the faintest signal across uncharted light years. A whisper from the past, a ghost of human ambition. Arvin's hand hovered over the console. He could try to reactivate it, harness it to amplify his distress call, but the system had been offline for decades, no, centuries. And yet, the pulse remained, faint, persistent, like someone waiting somewhere to answer. He exhaled, a soft hiss of air in his helmet. "You're either salvation or a trap," he muttered. The airwind jolted suddenly. The lights flickered violently, and the ship groaned in the vacuum, metal straining against forces Arvin could barely calculate. His body pressed instinctively against the nearest console. Sensors screamed a warning, multiple gravitational anomalies converging on his position, unseen and fast. Unknown ships or worse, something alive were homing in. Arvin's mind raced, calculating every possibility. His thrusters were offline. The fusion core was unstable. Life support was now reporting critical oxygen loss in 38 minutes if the backup system failed. He could eject in a pod, but the void around him was a predator silent, indiscriminate. The survival probability was infinitesimal. And yet, humans had a habit of achieving the improbable. He remembered the old stories, the ones the historians whispered in hushed tones aboard Terran carriers. Humans surviving nebulous storms that tore through fleets, boarding alien dreadnoughts with nothing but cunning and guts, defending settlements on barren worlds against forces no other species dared confront. Against impossible odds, humans endured. He swallowed hard and opened the intercom, his voice low but firm. "Erwan Command. This is Lieutenant Arvin. Initiating emergency protocol Alpha 9. I repeat, Alpha 9. Respond if you can hear me. Static." He hit the transmission again. The faint glow of the Terran beacon flared, almost imperceptibly, and his pulse quickened. A flicker of light ran across the viewport, a momentary signal that the beacon's core had partially awakened. His fingers flew over the controls, bypassing circuits, rerouting power from the auxiliary stabilizers. Sparks danced across the console, and he yelped, smacking his palm away. The metallic scent of ozone filled the bridge. Then faintly a signal. Not a voice, not words, but a harmonic resonance, almost musical. Arvin froze. The sound carried something beyond computation, a certainty, a promise of response. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but he felt it reverberate through his chest. Someone or something was listening. Hours bled into days. The gravitational anomaly circled, probing, but did not attack outright. Arvin learned to anticipate their movements, to navigate by instinct and residual Terran programming embedded in the ship's systems. Each maneuver was a dance with death, and he danced expertly, because survival demanded it. The bridge became a confessional, a chapel, a battlefield all at once. He spoke to the empty air, his voice carrying the weight of every human who had ever stared into the void and refused to blink. "Not luck," he murmured during one long watch, staring at the blackness outside. "Someone wanted me to survive." A soft vibration ran through the deck. The beacon's pulse intensified. A single message blinked on the terminal coordinates, ancient Terran language, long obsolete. They pointed toward a sector unrecorded in any modern star map. Arvin's lips curved into a grim smile. Hope was fragile, but it was there. And hope, he knew, was a weapon humans wielded better than any laser or plasma cannon. He activated the interstellar comms, sending a precise sequence to the beacon, designed to trigger any Terran ship within range. Hours passed in silence. The anomaly still circled, probing, testing, hungry. Arvin's thoughts returned repeatedly to the same question. Would the beacon summon salvation or annihilation? The lights flickered again. The hum of the fusion core was rising unnaturally. Then, without warning, the stars themselves seemed to ripple. A shadow passed over the Erwan, massive, deliberate, and alien. Sensors picked up impossible energy readings, powerful, ancient, beyond current technology. Arvin's hands clenched the console, his teeth grinding. "Who are you?" He whispered aloud. Not to the shadow, not to the stars, but to the universe itself. To whatever had made humans masters of survival. The Erwan's alarms screamed. And in the midst of the chaos, the faintest whisper of a human voice seemed to echo through the ship, carried by the beacon, by the pulse, by the sheer will of centuries of human perseverance. "We see you. Hold fast." Arvin inhaled sharply. Hope wasn't a light switch, it was a fire burning quietly in the heart. He felt it ignite within himself, a defiance stronger than fear. He wasn't alone. Somewhere in the void, humanity was watching. And humanity didn't forgive. He gripped the console as the shadows grew nearer. The unknown, the darkness, the vast and different expanse of stars, it all seemed to shrink in the presence of what was coming. And then, a single electric thought struck him. Survival was no longer a question. The question was, who would answer humanity's fury first? He looked out at the void, breath caught in his chest. And in that moment, Arvin realized that whatever was coming would not be mercy. It would be judgment. The beacon's pulse quickened. Not just a signal now, but a heartbeat. And somewhere beyond the stars, something ancient and human stirred, waking from centuries of silence. And somewhere in the darkness, the humans began to move. The void shifted. And somewhere, a dormant human ship was already crossing the threshold of history, its fire and fury yet unseen, but inevitable. The void was alive now, and Arvin could feel it in the tremor of the air one. The anomaly readings had shifted. The gravitational probes, the silent hunters circling him, had stiffened, frozen as though the universe itself had paused to witness what was coming. He rubbed his temples, feeling the exhaustion gnawing at his edges. 3 days without sleep, 3 days of near-constant calculations, maneuvers, and whispered prayers to gods he couldn't name, but had begun to believe in. The silence outside was no longer indifferent. It felt expectant, almost reverent. Then it happened. A shadow detached itself from the blackness, massive, geometric, terrifying in its simplicity. Not organic, not fully technological either, something old enough to have been built before the great expanse was charted. before humans had even set foot beyond the inner systems. Arvin froze. Sensors scrambled to make sense of it. The Erwin scanners reported impossibilities, shields within shields, energy signatures that flickered in patterns older than any known civilization. It was a ship, undeniably human in origin, but it moved with the certainty of a predator born for vengeance rather than exploration. He remembered the stories, the myths of the Terran Armada, vessels that vanished centuries ago during humanity's early exoduses. Ships that returned only when the balance demanded it. The ones who did not forgive and who answered every call for aid. And now one had found him. Arvin's fingers shook as he keyed the emergency transmission again. Desperate, hopeless, hopeful all at once. Distress signal Alpha 9. Identify yourself. Are you human? For a long moment, nothing answered. Then, through the static, a voice calm, commanding, and entirely human spoke. Who harmed our allies? The words struck Arvin like a pulse of lightning. Every gravitational anomaly, every shadow in the void, every minute he had spent counting the odds, they all became irrelevant. Humanity had arrived, and it came not with negotiation, but with the inevitability of judgment. He swallowed hard. I am Lieutenant Arvin of the Air One. My crew has evacuated. I am alone. We were being hunted. Names, positions, damage assessments. The voice cut in, precise, unflinching. Not cruel, but absolute. Arvin read off the details, voice trembling despite his efforts. He described every system failure, every anomaly, every threat. And through it all, he sensed a silent understanding behind that human authority, as if the ship itself could weigh morality, justice, and loyalty. Then came the sound that made his blood turn electric, a pulse, deep and resonant, vibrating through the hull. Not from the Air One, not from any alien ship, but from the human vessel itself. It felt like a heartbeat. Not mechanical, not artificial, alive. Arvin could feel it in his chest, and for the first time in days, the crushing pressure of isolation eased. He was not alone. He had never been alone. Humanity, in its infinite audacity, had answered. Outside, the shadows, those silent predators circling him, reacted. Sensors flared, weapon systems activated instinctively. The anomalies were intelligent, but they were not human. They did not understand the weight of a species that had survived the impossible, had rebuilt civilizations from ashes, had stared into the void and carved paths through it with sheer will. The human ship moved. Slowly at first, almost ceremoniously, aligning itself between the Erwin and the circling threats. Then, with terrifying efficiency, weapons arrays flared. Plasma lances, ionized disruptors, beams of calculated fury that cut through the darkness like lightning, tearing apart the alien anomalies with precision. Arvin's viewport glowed with the reflection of distant explosions. The void shook. Hull plates of the alien hunters were vaporized before they could react. The sound, transmitted through the Air One, was a symphony of destruction and, paradoxically, of salvation. He sank to his knees. Part fear, part awe, part overwhelming relief. Humanity was not just surviving. Humanity was asserting dominion, not through malice, but through the relentless protection of its own. The human vessel's voice came again, calm and commanding. Report survivors. Identify the aggressors. This sector is under our protection. Arvin's lips trembled as he keyed in what little data he had. He realized almost instinctively that he was being observed, evaluated, not just as a survivor, but as a representative of what humans would protect. Every decision he had made, every risk he had taken, was part of this judgment. And then he saw it, the vessel itself. Immense, terrifying, and impossibly human. Not a sleek carrier or shuttlecraft. Something far older, far more potent, built when humanity still believed in gods and warriors, when every starship was a prayer encoded in metal and fire. The hull bore insignias long thought lost, the marks of those who had first ventured into the uncharted voids. Arvin gasped. He could feel the subtle hand of providence in this moment. Not divine intervention in the traditional sense, but a sense of order, a balance restored. Somehow, impossibly, humanity had returned exactly when it was needed, to the precise coordinates of desperation. The anomalies had been annihilated in minutes, leaving the void eerily still. The silence that followed was different from the oppressive emptiness before. Now it was expectant, reverent, almost intimate. The void had seen the strength of human will, and it recoiled. Arvin exhaled, trembling. He had survived against odds that no other species would endure. And yet, he understood that survival was not just personal, it was a covenant. He was part of something far larger, a silent, unbroken chain of human perseverance and ingenuity stretching across centuries. The human ship hovered, scanning the airwan. A secondary voice, softer, almost compassionate, spoke through the console. "Do you understand what has been saved today?" Arvin nodded, though alone, and whispered, "I do, not by luck. Someone wanted me to live." A moment of quiet passed, profound and heavy. The stars outside no longer seemed infinite. They seemed measured, deliberate, waiting for the next move in a story much larger than any single life. Then the human voice returned, harder now, insistent. "Prepare for extraction. There's no time for hesitation. The expanse does not forgive the weak." Arvin rose, hands shaking, knees unsteady. He activated the manual docking procedures, aware that the human ship was already moving to envelop him, to bring him aboard. He caught a glimpse of the stars reflected in the vessel's hull. He thought he saw a symbol, not technological, not alien but human. A simple sigil, reminiscent of an ancient seal of trust and vengeance. Somewhere in that moment, he knew, humanity did not arrive to negotiate. Humanity arrived to enforce. And those who had threatened him, those who had underestimated the resolve of humans, would never see another star. Arvin's mind raced, a tangle of fear, relief, awe, and anticipation. He could feel the quiet pulse of order, the subtle hand of something beyond, perhaps God, threading justice through the cosmos. Not miraculous in the flashy sense, but inevitable, profound, undeniable. The docking clamps extended. The air wand trembled under the immense gravitational pull of the human vessel. Systems aligned. Panels clicked into place. The hum of the human ship penetrated his consciousness like a second heartbeat. And then, as he prepared to cross the threshold into salvation, Arvin paused. Something lingered in the void, a shadow, a warning. Not all enemies were destroyed. Not all truths had been revealed. The expanse was wide, patient, and cruel. Yet he did not falter. Humanity had answered. Humanity had arrived. And Arvin, for the first time since being stranded, felt truly alive. And somewhere in the quiet darkness, the human ship waited, patient and eternal, its fire and fury ready for the next call. The human vessel's shadow swallowed the stars, and Arvin realized that salvation carried a price, and that in its wake, every secret of the void would tremble. Arvin's hands trembled as he guided the air wand toward the human vessel. The docking clamps extended like mechanical arms, luminous with energy that felt almost sacred. The void had been a silent predator for days, but now, in the presence of this ancient human ship, it seemed to shrink, defer, acknowledge the weight of something older than fear, something that demanded respect. The air wand shuddered as the clamps latched, and the airlock hissed open. Arvin took a deep breath, feeling the pressurized wind from the human vessel sweep over him like a tide of certainty. Every step he took inside its immense hull was measured, deliberate, awe-inspiring. He had trained for space stations, warships, Terran colonies, but nothing had prepared him for this. The interior was vast, cathedral-like. Polished metal reflected light in impossible angles, consoles hummed with silent efficiency, and corridors stretched beyond comprehension. Arvin's boots echoed in the hall, but the echo was not emptiness, it was presence, a weight that felt almost alive. A figure approached. Not human in the way he expected, not frail, not fragile, but commanding, composed, every movement an assertion of authority. Even in the soft, dim light, the lines of determination on the face spoke volumes. Eyes like steel, yet capable of warmth. Arvin realized he was not just in a ship. He was in the embodiment of human will. "Lieutenant Arvin," the figure said. Voice calm, yet carrying the resonance of oceans and storms. "You have survived because you acted with clarity and courage under impossible odds. That is what humanity values most." Arvin swallowed. Words caught in his throat. He had expected judgment, interrogation, perhaps relief, but not reverence. Thank you. I only did what any human would do." A slight smile, almost imperceptible. "Perhaps. But few do when the odds are absolute. You have been observed. Your actions matter more than you understand." He was led to a central chamber, the core of the vessel. The room pulsed with a quiet, methodical energy like the ship itself breathed with purpose. Holographic stars shifted around him, constellations rearranging, as if the void outside were a living map. Arvin realized he was standing in the eye of a force both ancient and unstoppable. "Who built this ship?" He asked quietly, awed. It shouldn't exist." The figure's gaze softened, a fleeting trace of pride. "Humanity builds for survival, for purpose, for balance. We make what the universe demands, even when it seems impossible. This vessel has waited patient, ready to answer when the scales tip too far toward chaos." Arvin's chest tightened. He thought of the anomalies, the shadows that had circled him relentlessly. The predators in the void that had tested him, had toyed with him, had hunted relentlessly. And now he saw it all with clarity. The human ship had answered, not to negotiate, not to reason, but to enforce. The figure gestured to a holomap where dots of light marked distant sectors, red and orange indicating chaos, black indicating silence, and one central green dot representing Arvin's position. "The expanse is wide," the figure said softly, "but it is not beyond order. The void cannot claim what humanity chooses to protect. You were the test, and you passed." Arvin felt his hands clench. "I survived because someone wanted me to live." "Yes," the figure replied. "Not luck, intention, faith, even if unspoken. Humans believe in many things: logic, skill, courage, and sometimes in a higher order. We survive because we act, not because the universe smiles upon us. But sometimes the universe aligns when our resolve is absolute." The words resonated in Arvin's mind, deeper than he expected. He realized that humanity's victories were never granted, they were seized. Faith was not passive. It was an act, a defiance, a force that bent the void itself to purpose. "Your crew?" the figure asked, voice suddenly firm. "We can locate them. But first, you must understand the magnitude of what has awoken." Arvin nodded, swallowing his fear. "I understand that I am no longer alone. But," he hesitated, "what about the predators, those anomalies?" A shift in the holographic map showed dozens of new energy signatures spreading like fire through the sectors. "They will not survive," the figure said simply. "Not because we are strong, but because we are deliberate. Humanity protects its own. And we do not forgive negligence, nor betrayal, nor threats to our kind." Arvin's mind raced. Every story he had heard about humanity's conquests, about Terran ingenuity and perseverance, now carried new weight. The legends were not exaggerations, they were memory, encoded in living metal, in crews that spanned generations, in ships that slept waiting for the call. A warning light blinked on the console, bringing him back to immediate reality. "Lieutenant," the figure said, "the void does not wait. Even our intervention is not instantaneous. Your presence here is part of a larger alignment, one that you will help maintain." Arvin's throat tightened. I am ready." The human figure placed a hand on his shoulder, surprisingly human in warmth, yet firm. "Good, because you will witness the consequences of absence, and you will see the power of presence. Humanity does not merely survive. Humanity asserts, always. Outside the viewport, the stars shifted. Darkness breaking as vessels long dormant swept through the sectors with precise fury. The void trembled in subtle waves, rippling like water disturbed by a stone. Arvin felt a thrill, a fear, and a reverent awe. This was no mere rescue. This was a revelation. And he was a witness to the awakening of something far greater than his imagination had allowed, the quiet, implacable force of humanity itself. Yet, even in the midst of triumph, doubt lingered. He had been alone, stranded, hunted, and helpless. Could he truly trust that the power he now saw, the vast, almost godlike reach of humanity, would wield itself with wisdom? Or was he merely a pawn in a force too immense to control? The figure seemed to sense his hesitation. Courage, the voice said, is not the absence of doubt. It is action despite it. Today, you chose action. Tomorrow you will see why that matters. Arvin exhaled, trying to steady his pulse. He could feel the ship beneath him vibrating with latent energy, capable of reshaping sectors, annihilating threats, or delivering salvation. It was both frightening and beautiful. He realized he was standing at the threshold, not just of survival, but of revelation, the scale of human potential in a universe that seemed indifferent. The figure nodded toward the viewport. Do you see now? Humanity is never absent. We are patient, relentless, and precise. And when we choose, we answer. Always, even after centuries of silence, we respond. And we do not forget. Arvin's breath caught. Somewhere deep inside, he felt a quiet echo of divinity, not loud, not overt, but pervasive. The hand of order behind chaos, the intelligence threading justice and mercy through infinite darkness. He had prayed, whispered, and hoped in the silent void. And now he felt, perhaps for the first time, that something had answered. A sudden alert interrupted his thoughts. A distant sector flared in alarm. An entire alien fleet had taken aggressive action against a human outpost. The figure's expression hardened. And now, Lieutenant, you will see why the legends are true. Watch carefully. Humanity will answer. And in its answer, the void will learn restraint. Arvin braced himself as the human vessel rose, towering, vast, unstoppable. Every system flared into life, every weapon aligned, every sensor attuned. The silence of the expanse broke, replaced by the hum of purpose, the inevitability of action. He felt a surge of something he had not felt in days, awe, fear, hope, and recognition that he was part of a narrative far larger than himself. Humanity had awakened. And the void, for all its expanse and indifference, would never be the same. And somewhere deep in the heart of the human ship, centuries of patience and vengeance stirred to life, ready to enforce the will of humanity across the stars. The first strikes were fired, and Arvin realized that the expanse itself would witness a new chapter of human defiance, one written not in words, but in fire and steel. The void trembled with anticipation. Arvin stood at the viewport of the human vessel, his heart hammering as he watched the shadows of the alien fleet materialize against the black canvas of space. They were massive, innumerable, and utterly indifferent to the life they sought to extinguish. Every instinct screamed retreat, yet he could not move. Something in the air, in the hum of the ship, commanded stillness. "Observe," the figure beside him said. Voice calm, unwavering, yet carrying a weight heavier than the gravity of any star. "Do not mistake restraint for weakness. We do not act because we can. We act because we must." Arvin nodded, though his throat was tight. The alien fleet had already begun to converge on the human outpost, weapons primed, shields humming in cold anticipation of annihilation. The first strike would define the lesson. Then the human vessel moved. Slowly at first, then with absolute precision. Energy flares danced along the hull like fire coursing through veins. Weapon arrays aligned, focusing with a geometric inevitability. Arvin's breath caught as the first pulse cannon discharged. It tore through the vacuum in a beam of blue-white brilliance, cleaving a massive alien cruiser in half before it could react. The explosion was silent, but the vibration of raw power echoed through his chest. "Predictable," the human figure said, almost bored, yet every word carried centuries of confidence. Now the lesson begins. Arvin could only watch. Entire squadrons of alien ships attempted to flank, to confuse, to overwhelm. And every time, the human vessel countered not with chaos, but with purpose. A plasma net here, a precise ion strike there, shields shifting preemptively, targeting systems destroyed before their operators understood what had happened. It was not mere firepower. It was calculation, cunning, and the weight of centuries of human ingenuity distilled into a single, unstoppable entity. A part of Arvin screamed in disbelief. No species should be able to orchestrate such destruction so methodically. Yet another part of him felt a deep, resonant pride. This was humanity, stripped to its essence, relentless, clever, and bound by a code of protection that extended beyond reason. "Lieutenant," the figure said, voice gentle now, almost intimate, "watch closely. Note the distinction. We do not kill for vengeance. We do not destroy for sport. We eliminate threats because our own cannot survive in chaos. Every strike is a calculation, every maneuver deliberate. Understand this, and you understand why we endure." Arvin's eyes flicked across the holographic display, mapping each explosion, each pulse of energy, each alien ship disintegrating in precise succession. There was artistry in it, a rhythm he could almost dance to. And beneath the awe, a quiet, tremulous hope bloomed. If humanity could master chaos with such purpose, perhaps the void itself could learn order. A sudden vibration ran through the ship, a warning light blinked red. One of the alien ships, damaged but still mobile, had fired a concentrated plasma torpedo. It streaked across the vacuum, aimed directly at the human vessel's vulnerable midsection. Arvin froze, instinct screaming panic. The human figure, however, did not flinch. Instead, the vessel responded as if it anticipated the strike before it was launched. Shields adjusted, deflectors pulsed, and the torpedo disintegrated into harmless particles before it could even make contact. "You see," the figure said. "Predict, adapt, execute. That is how we endure. That is how humans survive." Arvin exhaled, a tremor of relief passing through him. Yet even as the human vessel advanced, systematic and merciless, he felt the weight of responsibility settle in his chest. These were not mindless weapons. They were the extension of human will. Every strike carried intent, every movement moral consequence, every choice echoing across the void. "Can they be reasoned with?" he asked quietly. "The aliens, can we negotiate?" The figure shook their head, eyes steel once more. "Some threats do not negotiate. Some dangers do not understand compromise. We act because we must. You survived because you understood urgency. These others have not yet learned it." The ensuing moments were a symphony of destruction. Pulse cannons erupted in precise arcs. Alien shields buckled under methodical barrages, and entire formations disintegrated before their captains could comprehend what had struck. And through it all, Arvin felt a stirring deep within pride, fear, awe, and an almost religious reverence for the sheer weight of human ingenuity unleashed. Amid the chaos, Arvin's thoughts drifted. He remembered his crew, scattered in escape pods, isolated across the void. Could they survive long enough to witness humanity's protection? Could the same relentless will that annihilated threats also extend mercy to those who had merely been lost in misfortune? A soft chime drew his attention to the ship's internal comm. A secondary, warmer voice spoke. "Lieutenant, some things must be seen to be believed. Others must be felt to be understood. Watch, listen, learn." He turned back to the viewport just as the final wave of alien vessels attempted a coordinated attack. The human vessel did not retreat. It did not falter. It moved like the culmination of centuries of evolution, war, ingenuity, and hope. Every strike landed with devastating precision. Every maneuver anticipated the enemy's strategy before it was conceived. And then the last ship fell. The void, once filled with the menace of the unknown, became eerily quiet. The expanse seemed to pause again, as if acknowledging the supremacy of human will. Arvin sank to the deck, hands gripping the railing, knees weak. He could hardly comprehend the scale of what he had witnessed. Humanity was not merely resilient. Humanity was intentional, calculated, merciful where possible, devastating where necessary. The figure beside him spoke again, softer now, almost contemplative. "Do you understand why we endure?" Arvin nodded slowly, voice barely above a whisper. "Because we act. Because we refuse to surrender. Because we protect what matters." The figure's gaze softened. "Yes, and now you will see why this is only the beginning. The expanse is vast. Threats are patient. But humanity is eternal, because we are deliberate and we are resolute. Every star, every shadow, every threat will learn that the void is never empty when humans watch." Arvin's mind raced. The power, the responsibility, the weight of witnessing human fury was overwhelming. Yet, in that moment, he understood the truth he had felt all along. Survival was not enough. Survival demanded vigilance, courage, and the relentless application of will. Humanity's strength was not in luck, nor in technology alone. It was in intent, in ingenuity, in a refusal to yield. He looked out at the void, now silent, still, but charged with latent energy. Somewhere in the darkness, countless eyes, human eyes, watched, waited, and prepared. Arvin understood finally that salvation came with a cost, that protection was not passive, and that humanity's presence in the expanse was absolute, inevitable, and unyielding. And somewhere beyond the stars, the humans waited for the next call, the next injustice that would awaken their fire once more. Arvin realized that the fight was far from over. The void still held secrets, and humanity's wrath would soon uncover them all. Arvin sat alone in the observation chamber, the void stretching endlessly before him, a black ocean flecked with distant stars that no longer felt distant at all. The alien fleet had been obliterated, the immediate threat eradicated, yet his chest was heavy. Not with fear, but with understanding of power, responsibility, and the weight of what it meant to be human in the expanse. The human vessel hummed softly beneath him, alive and aware. It wasn't just a ship. It was a sentinel, a guardian, a force of nature encoded in metal and will. Every panel, every corridor, every weapon array pulsed with purpose. Arvin realized that humanity had engineered survival not as an accident of evolution, but as a deliberate covenant with the void itself. "Lieutenant Arvin," the figure's voice echoed through the cum, breaking his reverie. "You are not here merely to observe. You are here to understand the weight of choice." Arvin stood, following the soft glow of the corridor toward the bridge. The ship's interior felt alive, responsive. Consoles illuminated as he passed, seemingly anticipating his attention, guiding him. He felt an almost divine rhythm in it, a subtle intelligence threading everything together. Not magic, not superstition, but a deep, human-designed order that resonated like a heartbeat in the void. "You've seen what happens when humanity answers," the figure continued. "Now you will see why restraint is as important as action." The bridge opened before him, vast and cathedral-like, with holographic projections mapping sectors of the expanse. Red blazes marked the destroyed alien fleet. Orange flashes marked lingering anomalies, smaller threats, remnants of intelligence that had survived the initial assault. And at the very center, green dots pulsed steadily, representing human presence. Arvin's breath caught. All of this is human?" "Yes," the figure said, voice calm but carrying the weight of history. "Our reach is not infinite. We are deliberate, not omnipotent. Every action must be precise. Every strike measured. This is the difference between survival and annihilation." Arvin's gaze drifted to the viewport. Far in the distance, shadows stirred remnants of the alien intelligence that had attacked him. Though diminished, they still lurked, still observed. And somewhere in that darkness, countless threats waited. The void was patient. Can we trust them to stay down? Arvin asked quietly. The figure's eyes, sharp and penetrating, met his. Trust is not the point. Presence is. Humanity's strength lies not in luck or chance. It lies in persistence, in clarity of purpose. We act, always. And when we act, the void remembers. A soft chime sounded on the console, drawing Arvin's attention. A new signal, small, subtle, almost imperceptible. An unknown vessel, ancient and primitive compared to the human ship, drifting alone. No weapons fired, no sensors active. Yet its mere existence was enough to make Arvin tense. The figure followed his gaze. This is the next step. Observation. Understanding. Humanity does not destroy recklessly. We protect, yes, but we also learn. We catalog the threats, study them, and then decide, intervene or wait. Arvin swallowed, the weight of responsibility pressing down. I understand. But how do you know when to act? The figure's gaze softened slightly, almost humanly compassionate. When an action risks annihilation. When the innocent are imperiled. When the scales of the void tip too far toward chaos. Humanity answers because it must, not because we desire war, but because we cannot allow suffering to continue unchecked. Arvin nodded, the realization settling in his bones. He had witnessed fury, yes, but also calculation, empathy, and restraint. Humanity's might was tempered by morality, honed by centuries of survival, and guided by something deeper than reason alone. Something divine, subtle, almost imperceptible. A soft vibration ran through the deck, another signal from the distant vessel. This one pulsed with a rhythm almost musical, ancient, deliberate. Arvin felt a shiver run down his spine. He knew that the next encounter would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. The void still held secrets, and humanity's presence, as vast as it was, would need guidance to ensure that force was used wisely. The figure spoke again, voice steady. You will witness the consequences of choice, Lieutenant. You will see what happens when power is wielded without wisdom, and what happens when it is. Remember this. Remember that humanity endures not through recklessness, but through relentless understanding, empathy, and courage. Arvin's fingers hovered over the console, tracing the green and red dots on the holomap. He felt a surge of determination. He would not just survive, he would learn. He would act wisely. Humanity had answered once to save him. Now he would honor that answer by understanding it, by carrying it forward. A low hum rose from the vessel, vibrating through the floor and into his chest. He realized with awe that the ship itself seemed aware, not conscious in a human sense, but attuned to purpose, to morality, to the patterns of life and death in the void. It was as if humanity had encoded its essence into living metal, creating a guardian that would never tire, never waver, and never forget. Are you ready? The figure asked softly. To witness not just power, but judgment? Arvin swallowed hard, nodding. Yes, I'm ready. The viewport ahead of him shimmered as the human ship powered up, preparing to engage the distant, unknown vessel. Pulses of energy flared along its hull, shields rippled, and weapon arrays hummed with calculated anticipation. The void itself seemed to hold its breath, as though the expanse understood that something extraordinary was about to occur. Arvin felt the quiet presence of something greater than himself, something beyond comprehension. Not a god in the way myths told stories, but a guiding hand woven through the fabric of existence, a subtle order, aligning events, granting survival, enforcing justice. And then, with a pulse that resonated through the vessel, the human ship moved, slicing through the darkness with precision, intent, and inexorable authority. Arvin realized fully that humanity's presence in the void was more than survival. It was vigilance. It was judgment. It was a covenant written in steel and fire. And he, too, was now a witness to that covenant. And somewhere in the silent reaches of the void, A new reckoning began, a reminder that no shadow could escape humanity's watchful gaze. The unknown vessel stirred, ancient and patient, unaware that it had awakened something far older, far more relentless, the unyielding will of humanity. The distant vessel moved with an eerie patience, ancient engines flickering with energy that predated most known Terran records. Arvin watched from the bridge, his pulse hammering in his chest. Unlike the alien fleet they had destroyed, this ship did not charge blindly. It did not swarm in predictable formations. It drifted with purpose, deliberate, calculating, as though it had waited centuries for this encounter. Beside him, the human figure's eyes remained fixed on the viewport, expression unreadable. "Observe carefully," the voice instructed. "Not all threats react with haste. Some test, probe, calculate. Patience can be as deadly as fury." Arvin leaned forward, captivated. The void around the vessel seemed to ripple, subtle distortions twisting the starlight. The ship's shields glimmered like liquid metal, bending light in impossible patterns. And yet, despite its apparent invincibility, the human ship approached with deliberate calm. No reckless charge, no immediate strike, only the hum of immense power and the weight of experience. The first contact came silently. Sensors detected micro-disturbances along the unknown vessel's hull, fragments of its energy dissipating. The human ship had not fired yet. It didn't need to. Its mere presence disrupted, anticipated, and unbalanced the ancient craft. Arvin felt a thrill, a chill, and all at once. Humanity's reach extended beyond firepower. It was intellect, foresight, and resolve distilled into a living machine. "It's anticipating them," he breathed, unable to keep the wonder out of his voice. "Precisely," the human figure replied. "We do not rely on chance, we act with knowledge. We strike when consequences are unavoidable. We wait when patience serves better than impulse. Observe, Lieutenant, for this is the essence of human will." The unknown ship made its move. A pulse of energy, subtle and precise, arced toward the human vessel. Shields flared, sensors hummed, and the pulse dissipated harmlessly. Arvin's heart raced so close, yet controlled, without panic. "They're testing you," the figure said softly. "Do not mistake aggression for strategy, nor caution for weakness. They are learning, as we have, that some forces cannot be underestimated. Humanity is not merely physical, it is moral, mental, and relentless." Arvin's thoughts drifted to his crew, scattered across escape pods in the expanse. The human vessel had saved him, annihilated countless threats, and now faced an adversary older than he could imagine. Yet, through it all, he sensed something profound. The measure of humanity was not in raw power, but in knowing when, where, and how to apply it. Another pulse, sharper this time, sliced across the void. The human ship adjusted instantaneously. Energy displaced, shields reoriented, and the unknown vessel trembled under the unseen pressure of human ingenuity. Arvin's jaw clenched. "It's calculating faster than I can track. Faster than thought." "Yes," the figure said, voice soft but resolute. "Human survival is not an accident. We anticipate, we plan, we endure. And when necessary, we enforce. Watch closely, Lieutenant. This is more than victory. It is teaching, warning, and restraint all at once." Arvin's gaze locked on the unknown vessel. Its design was alien in intent and construction. Yet somehow, humanity's presence made it falter. Systems that had functioned for centuries were disrupted, disoriented by anticipation and precision. The realization struck him. Humans did not merely fight. They imposed order upon chaos itself. The human vessel's voice returned, calm, deliberate. "We are giving you one opportunity to retreat or surrender. Make your choice." Silence answered. Then, faintly, the unknown ship shifted, evasive maneuvers almost imperceptible. Arvin felt his pulse quicken. Humanity's words had weight, not just in threat, but in inevitability. The void itself seemed to respond, the expanse bending subtly under the assertion of human will. "Lieutenant," the figure said, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder, "remember this. Power without intent is destruction. Power with intent is survival, justice, and order. Humanity's strength lies not in the ability to annihilate, but in the discipline to choose when and how." Arvin nodded, swallowing hard. The lessons were tangible now, etched into the very hum of the ship, the vibrations beneath his boots, and the precise, unstoppable orchestration of every system around him. The unknown vessel, finally realizing the futility of its position, adjusted its course. No surrender, not yet, but hesitation replaced recklessness. Its energy signatures flickered, shields weakened, engines struggling against the subtle but absolute pressure of human judgment. Arvin exhaled, relief mingling with awe. He had expected battle, fire, fury, but what he witnessed was far more profound: mastery, deliberate restraint, and unyielding human will. Humanity was not merely responding, it was teaching the void a lesson in balance, morality, and survival. The figure spoke one last time, voice quiet, almost contemplative. "Observe the restraint, Lieutenant. This is the difference between mere species and humanity. We endure because we understand the weight of our actions, the responsibility of our power, and the cost of inaction. Never forget this." Arvin's eyes lingered on the distant vessel, now retreating, disrupted and disoriented, yet alive. He realized fully that the void was not empty, not indifferent, but patient, observant, and capable of teaching its own lessons. Humanity's presence was not just survival, it was assertion, judgment, and hope all at once. And in the quiet aftermath, as the void settled around them, Arvin felt a subtle, almost imperceptible presence, a guiding hand woven into the fabric of the expanse. Not loud, not obvious, but present, undeniable. Not luck, not chance. Something greater, aligning events with purpose. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "Not luck. Someone wanted this to happen. Someone wanted me to see it all." The human figure nodded, a hint of understanding in their gaze. "And now you know, Lieutenant. Humanity answers the call, always. And in our answer, the void learns that nothing escapes justice when we act." Arvin's chest swelled with awe and resolve. The lessons were clear. Survival demanded vigilance, mastery required intent, and humanity's reach was far greater than he had ever imagined. And somewhere in the darkness beyond comprehension, the void trembled, aware that humanity's fire and judgment had been awakened, and it would never rest. The unknown vessel retreated, but Arvin sensed that its secrets and the lessons it carried would not remain hidden. The human ship's next move would reveal the true cost of order in the void. The void had settled, but it no longer felt empty. Even in silence, it whispered a low, distant murmur of energy and intent. Arvin moved through the corridors of the human vessel, each step reverberating with purpose. The ship seemed to respond to him, subtly aligning its systems, illuminating paths that led not by design, but by instinctive understanding. He reached the central archive, a vast chamber filled with holographic projections, ancient schematics, and data cores older than any Terran starbase records. The air was heavy with history, with the weight of countless missions, centuries of humanity's trials, and victories won against impossibilities. A soft chime announced the presence of the human figure. "This," they said, voice calm yet resonant, "is where you will understand why we endure. Not merely through strength, but through memory, planning, and intent." Arvin stepped closer to a holographic display, his eyes widening. Maps of the expanse, star systems he had never charted, alien civilizations long forgotten, and records of humanity's earliest excursions into deep space. Each entry was annotated with precision: resources salvaged, species studied, crises averted, conflicts resolved. "These records," Arvin murmured, awestruck, "they span centuries." "Yes," the figure said, "we remember, we catalog, we anticipate. Knowledge is the foundation of survival. Without understanding, power becomes chaos." And humanity has always sought understanding, even in the darkest reaches of the void. Arvin's gaze fell on a section detailing ancient Terran vessels, ships like the one he now stood on, long thought lost to time. Each vessel had its story, tragedy, triumph, lessons learned, and one ship, in particular, drew his attention. Its log indicated a mission of judgment and protection, centuries ago, in a sector that had since been abandoned. The entry ended with a single enigmatic note. "We wait, patient and eternal, until the void calls again." He turned to the figure. "This ship, it has been waiting for centuries?" The figure nodded. "Yes, humanity builds for permanence. We anticipate the unforeseen. We endure not because we are invincible, but because we are patient and deliberate. This vessel is a guardian, a judge, and a teacher all at once." Arvin felt the magnitude of it press down on him. To think that a single ship, guided by human will, could wait centuries, observing the void, prepared to intervene only when necessary, it was almost beyond comprehension. Yet here it was, alive with purpose, and now he was part of its story. "Lieutenant," the figure said, voice softer, almost contemplative, "you have witnessed our power. You have seen restraint and judgment. But there is more to understand, the balance between mercy and enforcement, between survival and dominance." Arvin's mind raced. The alien fleet had been destroyed, yet the unknown vessel had retreated. Was it mercy that held humanity back from annihilating it entirely, or was it strategy? The human figure's next words answered the question before he could ask. "We strike only when necessary," they said. "Not out of vengeance, not out of hatred. We enforce because the void itself demands balance. To wield power without restraint is to invite destruction. To act without understanding is to fail. Humanity endures because we act with intent, and we restrain ourselves when wisdom dictates." Arvin nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of the lesson. He realized that the human ship's power was not measured in destruction alone, but in the discipline to choose when and how to wield it. Every strike, every maneuver, every decision was calibrated to preserve life where possible and enforce justice where required. A soft hum vibrated through the chamber, drawing his attention to another holographic projection. This one showed the unknown vessel, drifting now in the distance. Still alive, still enigmatic. Arvin felt a chill. "It's still out there." "Yes," the figure said. "And it will remain, not destroyed, but observed. Humanity teaches through action, not indiscriminate annihilation. It will learn that the void has eyes and consequences, and that threats cannot act without reckoning." Arvin exhaled, a mixture of relief and awe. The ship's lessons were clear. Power was not merely to conquer, but to understand, to protect, and to enforce with wisdom. Humanity's endurance was not accidental, it was deliberate, patient, and righteous. He walked to the viewport, watching the unknown vessel fade into the distance. The void stretched endlessly, but he no longer felt isolated. Humanity's presence had altered the very fabric of the expanse. It had imposed order, not through chance, but through will, intellect, and moral intent. The human figure stood beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Remember this, Lieutenant. Power without understanding destroys. Power with understanding endures. Humanity survives because we do not act recklessly, because we anticipate, because we enforce not out of anger, but out of necessity. And now you have seen it." Arvin nodded, a sense of clarity settling over him. He had been lost in the void, hunted, terrified, and alone. Now he understood not only survival, but purpose. Humanity's reach was immense, yes, but it was guided by wisdom and restraint. It was deliberate, moral, and unyielding in defense of its own. A soft vibration ran through the vessel, almost imperceptible, yet he felt it in his chest. Not an alarm, not a threat, but a presence. A subtle reminder that beyond understanding, beyond intellect, beyond courage, there was something quietly guiding all things toward balance. Not miraculous, not overt, but present, Arvin whispered to himself, voice barely audible. Not luck. Not chance. Someone, something, guided this. The figure beside him said nothing, but Arvin sensed agreement. The void had been patient, humanity had been deliberate, and he had been chosen to witness it all. And somewhere in the endless darkness, the unknown vessel carried secrets that would one day challenge humanity again. But by then, the void would already know the cost of defiance. The lessons of restraint and judgment were only the beginning. Arvin sensed that the void held even deeper mysteries, and that humanity's role in shaping its balance had only just begun. The human vessel glided through the expanse like a predatory shadow, vast yet silent, its immense power cloaked in discipline. Arvin stood once more at the observation deck, watching the distant stars stretch and bend under the subtle influence of the ship's navigation fields. The void no longer felt infinite. It felt alive, responsive, as if the human presence had awakened its consciousness to the patterns of order and intent. Beside him, the human figure moved silently, their gaze sweeping the distant sectors. "Observe carefully, Lieutenant," they said. "The universe is not merely black and white. Threats are not always obvious. Danger can hide in subtlety, in patience, in shadows. And humanity's strength is not only in our ability to strike, but in our understanding of when to spare." Arvin's chest tightened. He thought of the unknown vessel, ancient and enigmatic, still drifting at the edge of reach, untouched but watched. The temptation to eliminate it entirely was nearly instinctual, but the human ship had restrained itself. Why? Arvin asked, voice low. Why not destroy it? It could return. The figure's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. Because destruction is not always the answer. Power without mercy is tyranny. Survival without understanding is chaos. Humanity endures not through domination alone, but through wisdom. Sometimes, the greatest strength lies in restraint, in allowing life to exist while observing and guiding its course. Arvin swallowed, the weight of the lesson settling into his bones. He had been trained to fight, to survive, to act without hesitation, but what he now understood was something deeper. True power was not measured in the sheer force of annihilation, but in the judgment that governed its application. The ship adjusted course, following a subtle energy signature ahead. Arvin could feel the hum of its systems resonating in his chest, alive, deliberate, aware. The vessel ahead flickered a shadow of alien technology long thought extinct. Yet the human ship moved with precision, surrounding it, isolating it, creating a pattern that left no escape, but without immediate destruction. "Lieutenant," the figure said, voice calm yet carrying the weight of centuries, "witness the measure of mercy. Observe how restraint shapes the void. This is what separates a species that survives from one that merely endures." Arvin watched as the ancient vessel made its move, attempting a subtle energy maneuver, testing the limits of the human ship's patience. Every action was countered, not by force alone, but by anticipation, calculation, and moral judgment. Shields aligned, sensors traced every pulse, and yet no strike was made. Humanity waited. Humanity measured. Humanity taught. For the first time, Arvin realized that the void was not merely a place of survival, it was a crucible. And humanity's presence in it was both hammer and anvil. They struck only when necessary, restrained only when wisdom dictated, and enforced order through judgment as much as through force. A sudden alert flared across the bridge. Smaller anomalies, micro-predators of energy, flickered in the surrounding sector. Instinct screamed to strike, to eliminate, to assert dominance, yet the human figure did nothing. They simply observed, tracked, cataloged, and prepared. Arvin felt a strange, almost spiritual awe. Humanity's vigilance was not merely survival, it was stewardship. "Not every threat requires destruction," the figure said quietly. "Some require observation, study, understanding. To destroy without learning is to fail. To act without discernment is to become the very chaos we resist." Arvin's mind raced. The unknown vessel ahead, the remnants of alien fleets, the micro-anomalies, they all existed as tests, as lessons. And the human ship, patient, precise, and inexorable, enforced not merely survival, but the understanding that life, even alien life, had its place in the balance of the void. A flicker of movement caught Arvin's eye. One of the anomalies surged toward a nearby human outpost, small and seemingly insignificant. Instinctively, he tensed, ready to warn, to react. Yet the human figure held up a hand. "Observe." The vessel intercepted the anomaly with surgical precision. No collateral damage, no wasted energy. The threat neutralized, and yet the anomaly was studied, its technology cataloged, its purpose analyzed. Arvin felt a chill. This was not mere power. This was mastery, stewardship, and moral discipline fused into an unstoppable force. The figure beside him turned, eyes meeting Arvin's. "Do you understand now? Humanity does not act recklessly. We endure because we know the cost of our choices. We act with intent, with calculation, and with mercy. Strength without wisdom is meaningless. Power without purpose is dangerous. And every action we take is measured against the principle that survival is not enough. We must ensure the balance of the void itself." Arvin exhaled, awe settling over him like a tidal wave. He understood finally that humanity's victories were not accidents. They were deliberate, moral, and inevitable. Every strike, every restraint, every act of judgment was a manifestation of human will tempered by conscience. He looked at the unknown vessel, still drifting at the edge of the sector, ancient and watchful. "And it will remain," he whispered, "to learn." "Yes," the figure said softly, "and humanity will watch. We will act when necessary. We will endure when possible. And in all our actions, we honor both the living and the void itself. That is why we survive. That is why we endure. That is why we are human." The hum of the vessel beneath him seemed to resonate with those words, a subtle echo of something greater, something eternal, guiding not through spectacle, but through quiet order. Arvin felt the weight of centuries in that vibration, the echo of countless human choices aligning fate with intention. And somewhere in the silent reaches of the expanse, the unknown vessel shivered not from fear, not yet, but from understanding. Humanity had taught restraint, judgment, and the price of defiance, and the lesson had only just begun. Arvin realized that the void itself would never be empty, never indifferent, for humanity's watchful presence now shaped its destiny, and the ultimate test was yet to come. The void had grown silent. Stars shimmered in their distant orbits, pale against the black canvas that had once threatened to swallow Arvin and his crew. Yet this silence was no emptiness. It was charged, alive, resonant with consequences and purpose. The human ship loomed vast before him, a cathedral of steel and will, its systems humming with the quiet intelligence of centuries. Arvin stood at the observation deck, his hands pressed lightly against the cold viewport. Below, the distant unknown vessel drifted, its ancient hull scarred but intact, still stubbornly alive. For a moment, he felt fear not for himself, but for the fragile balance that now existed in the expanse. Humanity had imposed its will, yes, but the void was patient, eternal, and capable of testing even the most deliberate actions. The human figure beside him spoke softly, eyes fixed on the distant silhouette. "Lieutenant, understand this. Power alone does not define humanity. Intent, restraint, judgment, these are what make us eternal. Today, you have witnessed not just survival, but stewardship. You have seen what it means to act as both sword and shield." Arvin swallowed, feeling the weight of the lessons settle in his chest. He thought of his crew, scattered in pods across the void, still alive because humanity had answered not recklessly, but with calculated purpose. He thought of the alien fleet obliterated in measured fury. He thought of the unknown vessel, still drifting, still being observed, still learning the lesson of restraint. A sudden hum ran through the human ship, soft but insistent. Arvin's gaze flicked to the bridge controls, to the holographic display projecting the expanse. Energy pulses traced the path of the ancient vessel, mapping it, cataloging it, preparing for every possible contingency. The human figure's voice cut through the hum, deliberate and calm. "It is time for the final lesson. Watch closely, Lieutenant. Observe the consequences of both mercy and judgment." The ancient vessel shifted, an almost imperceptible maneuver, testing the limits of human patience. A miscalculation, a sudden misalignment, would have spelled destruction, but the human ship did not strike blindly. Instead, systems flared, shields adjusted, and a subtle but undeniable force nudged the vessel into a controlled trajectory, away from any civilian outposts, away from unnecessary destruction. Arvin's breath caught. He realized then that this was not just enforcement, it was teaching. The unknown vessel had been spared, yet guided, corrected, restrained. Humanity's hand was present not as tyranny, but as order, as justice, as an ethical constant in a universe otherwise indifferent. "Lieutenant," the figure said, voice soft but intense, "do you see? The void tests all who enter it. It challenges, it threatens, it tempts. But humanity endures because we act with intelligence, with morality, and with courage. We do not merely survive, we shape the void to preserve life, to enforce balance, to protect the future." Arvin nodded, feeling a swell of understanding and pride. Humanity's victories were never simple. They were never random. They were deliberate, moral, and eternal. The human ship's actions were not chaos. They were purpose incarnate, a lesson for the void itself. The unknown vessel emitted a faint energy pulse, almost like a sigh, as if recognizing the lesson imparted. Arvin felt a shiver run down his spine, not from fear, but from awe. Even in its survival, the alien presence had been irrevocably changed, shaped by the encounter, aware now of the consequences of defiance against a species that acted with will, discipline, and conscience. "Do you understand now?" the figure asked. "The void is never empty, Lieutenant. Every shadow, every threat, every whisper of chaos is observed, catalogued, and measured. Humanity answers the call, always. And the expanse remembers." Arvin's eyes traveled across the black ocean of stars. He thought of his crew, of the alien fleet, of the ancient vessel, now drifting in calculated restraint. And he understood something profound. Survival alone was not enough. Humanity endured because it acted with purpose, courage, and a moral compass that no void, no threat, could erase. A quiet presence seemed to stir in the vastness beyond the stars. Not a voice, not a form, but a subtle, undeniable intelligence, the weight of order, the echo of creation, the sense that the universe itself acknowledged the deliberate actions of human will. Arvin whispered, almost to himself, "Not luck, not chance, someone wanted this to happen. Someone wanted us to endure." The figure beside him placed a hand on his shoulder. "And now, Lieutenant, you carry that lesson forward. Humanity answers the call, not for glory, not for vengeance, but because we must. And the void, in all its darkness, will never forget that presence, that judgment, and that mercy." The distant stars shifted slightly, as if acknowledging the moment. The unknown vessel faded further into the void, alive but marked by the encounter. The alien fleet lay destroyed, the micro-threats neutralized, and yet the expanse itself seemed to pulse with a new understanding. Humanity's presence was not an accident. It was a covenant silent, deliberate, eternal. Arvin exhaled, relief and awe mixing into a single profound recognition. He had been lost in the void. He had feared annihilation. He had doubted survival. But now he understood. The void was never empty. Humanity watched. Humanity judged. Humanity endured. The human figure's voice was the last sound Arvin heard as he gazed into the infinite. "Remember, Lieutenant, survival is not enough. Action without purpose is failure. Humanity endures because we act with courage, wisdom, and conscience. And when we do, the void listens. Arvin closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of centuries, of choices, of morality, and of divine subtlety woven into the fabric of existence. He knew that humanity's fire would burn eternally in the expanse, a silent sentinel for those who dared to challenge the order of life. And somewhere in the infinite darkness, humanity's answer lingered, resolute and eternal, waiting, watching and never yielding.